Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This morning we have the author of The Tao of Bitcoin. Scott, had the most incredible speech. Just 2 secs. Scott just made the most incredible speech at the Canadian Bitcoin conference. We're going to dive into a couple of things there. Scott, that message, that blew me away, that speech. There's one thing that you said. We're at the beginning of what you think is the most significant intellectual shift in recorded human history. We're undergoing a radical transformation of human consciousness, synchronizing with Bitcoin. We're coming online one person at a time. That's absolutely massive. I believe it's totally true. But what do you mean by that? Like, how's Bitcoin changing humanity?
Wow, yeah, I thank you. I'm flattered when anybody has watched it. Bitcoin is a personal.
It's epic. I've linked it below.
Cool. Yeah, check it out. I had a lot of fun with that one. Bitcoin is a personal journey that starts on the inside and transforms first the way you think about things until it's transformed the way you think about everything. And when it's done that, you start to act differently and interact with different people. You seek out other people who are thinking about things in the same way. And so I think it's totally normal for us to think about this as something that's just happening for us. And we were talking offline beforehand about Bitcoin conferences and what happens when you go to a Bitcoin conference. You start to understand that it's not just you. This is something that is part of the process of what happens to everybody as they understand it. And this is something that it's underway now. So it might not be a massive number of people all over the world that have already had this experience, but when one person becomes 10 and then 100 and 1,000, it's just a process that repeats over and over again. And what I was talking about in the speech is this idea that at a certain point, we are going to hit a critical mass where the signal is so strong that I think that people will just experience sort of a species level awakening. It's an idea that everyone, as part of understanding on their own, we're synchronizing to everyone else who's also understood it. And as that number grows, the power of the vibration is growing. It's what a time to be alive.
Mate, it is the greatest time to be alive simply because we have Bitcoin. Without it, I think it'd be a very interesting state of affairs. But with like what you were saying there, we're all arriving at this place on our own by reading the books, listening, researching, diving into the white paper, watching podcasts. And we all find this truth and come there, and there's like these few people, like in that video, you rated it back to the 100 monkey experiment, or where they're watching the 100 monkeys, and they just figured it out. A couple of individuals figured it out, but once they did and they started spreading that message, then everyone like rapidly got it. So there's about 8-9 billion people on the planet. Maybe like 1 million people actually get Bitcoin, which is tiny, which is crazy to be able to think about. I guess everyone that's been here for a little while just relates everything in their life back to Bitcoin. And so we see Bitcoin in the world around us, but that's only true for about 1 million people worldwide. How long does it take, for that rapid expansion to go? Does there need to be a catalyst that really like forces people to start paying attention now, and it allows that idea to spread? Or, is 1 million people enough for it to catch wildfire?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we have really going for us right now, partly is that the conditions for the mass awakening are really fermenting, and a lot of different things are happening all at once. So, for the longest time, if your money is losing purchasing power at 2% a year, it's like Jeff Booth says, if somebody is stealing 2% of the stuff out of your house, it's just a small enough number that you might not notice, or even if you did, you might not really care. But when it gets to be 7, 8, 10, your money is worth half what it was every 5 years or 7 years. Like that on its own is one thing, but there is more things than that, right? I think like the idea of uncensorable, unconfiscatable, peer-to-peer money, these are all ideas whose time is arriving. So there are social phenomenon. Things are happening in different parts in the world that are creating kind of different access points that are, it's fertile ground for this thing to sort of metastasize. And that's why I'm in the camp that I think this thing happens sooner than later, and sooner doesn't mean like overnight, but I would guess by the end of the decade there will be enough of us that things are going to look a lot different.
Yep. It's interesting, like the end of the decade, which is 2030, and within Bitcoin, we hear about the 2030 agenda and stuff. As it's like these two opposing forces, good and bad, right and wrong, light and darkness, whatever it is, emerging to this one point, and one's going to win, I think. And, I think truth always prevails. But do you think with Bitcoin, like at least my journey, I feel like it's inevitable. Because when you're on a Bitcoin standard yourself, you're already there. Like within yourself, and Bitcoiners are already in that world. So I just feel like it's inevitable because it's here right now. But with the opposing force, do you think it's just going to be easy, or what do you see coming?
Yeah, I think I think it's going to be very difficult. And the status quo, or the establishment, is something that doesn't know how to be any other way than something that creeps in terms of growing its authority and control. And its reason for being is to externally impose a security or a structure around something that Bitcoin is really obsoleting a lot of the why we need those things at all. Centralization of institutions. It was a necessary technology for a time that in my mind, like hasn't caught up and realized yet that now we don't really need those things anymore. We don't need something to protect our property rights. We have unconfiscatable property. We don't need a someone to determine what the monetary policy of the Bank of Australia should be. We just have a monetary policy that never changes and everyone can understand and agree on. That just is better. That's something that makes more sense. But the problem is it's like figuring out that you should be with a different partner in your life, and that doesn't really do much for your current partner if you have one. Like there's just it's an awkward time in the middle, and it's going to be an ugly split, I think. But this is partly why I agree that it's unstoppable, it's inevitable, and the most important part about it is to sort of help people understand that on the other side waits something really great, and that's where part of why I wanted to write the book and the speech in the same way at Montreal was one of really overwhelming positivity. I was really, before I fully understood Bitcoin, in a little bit of a doomer place, and I feel like even with Bitcoin, there's a lot of fixation at times around all of the negative things that are causing Bitcoin to be necessary. So currency debasement and elimination of cash and all of these things. And I think that that's good. It's important to understand that stuff, but it's really great to spend your time, if you can, in a place of thinking about positive outcomes, focusing on the future that you're hoping to manifest into reality, and helping other people row in that direction too. It's better if we can to magnetize other people to Bitcoin by helping them understand that if they transition their life to embodying this idea and using this technology, that they're not going to be victims to the accelerating debasement of currency and loss of freedom that is sort of systemic as part of this agenda you mentioned.
Yeah. That I think we should dive into the book, the Tao of Bitcoin. But when you said negative fixation, my wife quite often says, you talk about things that are so negative sometimes, and I don't even think like that, because I have that beacon of light, of hope. That's Bitcoin. And I think those things just are happening, or that they're just laying down the foundation to lead that way. So like you're saying, it is important to look at them and look at them openly and be like, okay, maybe the worst outcome won't happen when they go to CBDCs, but what if it does? And just look at it factually and make up your own decisions, your own choices from there. And if you're aligned with Bitcoin, sometimes those decisions are a whole lot easier. And then, like you're saying, with Bitcoin, we should really focus on this joyous world that is within Bitcoin. So you wrote a whole book, the DAO of Bitcoin. The DAO is something that's been in your life, I believe, since you're about 9 years old, Scott. You watched a video, The Last Emperor, was it? And just from there, you're enthralled.
Yeah. So that was kind of my first touch on Chinese culture. I was 6, and it was a very strange movie for my mom to take me. It was like an independent film, which is not something that we did a lot of as when I was that age. So I don't know how it happened. I've never been able to get out of her why she decided to do that. But yeah, it just kept coming back up in my life after that, here and there. And, it's like Bitcoin. I got my first touch point with Bitcoin 2013, didn't do anything about it. Hit me again in 2017, didn't do anything about it. And then it was 2020 where things really sort of like changed for me. But yeah, I have been thinking about Taoism my whole life. And so when I understood Bitcoin fully, I had the idea to write this book for a long time. And it is a message of overwhelming positivity, partly because what you were saying about the inevitability of it, I think, is just that we are not meant to be the natural order of sort of universal law is not one where a small group of people are meant to have dominion and authority over everyone else. We're meant to live in a harmonious way together. That's the natural order of things.
Of course.
These are ancient principles of how things work. And so Bitcoin to me is an idea and a money that has emerged naturally from this natural law. Like this is just the way things are supposed to be. And so thinking about it in that way and wanting to share that message, this is how I relate to, there are some ancient economic principles of why this stuff works, and it's important to understand that stuff as well. But at the end of the day, like I really believe that there is sort of a universal energetic principle that creates all things and connects all things, and that principle is why the world we live in is so beautiful. It is why everything is so abundant. The only reason is that we aren't living in a world, in a civilization that mirrors that today, is that we have gone so far afield with the way money works and the way government works. And these are not naturally occurring problems. These are man-made problems that could be fixed as something better emerges. And that's what the idea is. That's the principle of the book.
Yeah. With the book, like how would you, it's not simple really to explain the DAO, but how would you break the DAO down?
So Taoism is a philosophical or religious tradition that emerged out of ancient China that is, sort of centrally believes that an energetic force, the Tao, is responsible for the creation of all things and the interconnectedness of all things. It is, I use this phrase a lot in the book, the idea that everything is connected by energy, and everything is connected by energy. It's a philosophy of oneness. When you believe that we're part of something bigger, something that has a higher purpose and a sort of like sacred engineering behind it, and I think there are a lot of different ways to think about this. This is just how I've kind of come to understand it, and so there are this underlying principle of the interconnectedness and the energetics of all things is sort of the core principle that I really think is the most important thing for people to understand. And Bitcoin is energy money. It is money that connects all things through energy. It is money that runs on energy and makes every source of energy in the world quantifiable and commodifiable and accessible, because all of a sudden we have a financial incentive, or even just the idea of thinking about energy on a planetary level, because we can convert it and share it and move it with across time and space anywhere in the world. So energy is the underlying thing that connects us through Bitcoin. And maybe just to finish that thought, I think that money is also energy, sort of metaphorically, in the sense that we transform our time and our energy into money when we're working. And when I turn my time and energy into money to buy a product or a service from you, that's energy and time that you've transformed into something. So even that exchange itself is an exchange of energy. We don't think of that way because we've substituted money in the middle as the medium of transferring energy back and forth to each other. And so we are genuinely transferring energy between each other. And when we're using Bitcoin, we're just doing it in a way that properly is connected to energy. It has a tie to sort of the energetic way of the way things really work.
Yeah. Mate, that's exactly how I think about Bitcoin, and reading your book really, I think, helped to find those thoughts and hone in with it. Years ago, I was just standing at the beach and just enjoying the sunrise. I looked around, I'm like, everything is everything. And I just kept saying it to myself, like, everything is everything. And I thought it was the most profound thought that I'd ever had. Those three words, everything is everything. Because everything is energy. In whatever way that everything comes together, it is all energy, and it's just like we're all connected. There's no the illusion that you and I are separate, or we're separated from everything, is just a construct of our own mind. And like we're denser towards ourselves, but it's sort of like a rainbow. I can't really think of the right analogy right now. And this morning, 6:50 in the morning. But it's just degrees as we go out, and it's just all these molecules interacting together, and the further they are away from everyone's gravitational pull. But when we're using that fiat money, like it's just got no energy behind it, no positive energy. It's just dead. So when we're exchanging with each other and trying to have a connection, we're passing a dead thing between us. Whereas with Bitcoin, that's tapped in to everything and energy, and it's created from the source, basically. Like that is how Bitcoin comes into the world, whether it's coal, whether it's wind, whether it's hydroelectric, whether it's volcanic energy, solar panels, methane. It's using life force, energy, creation to create this money, and then we're exchanging that between us. It's an amazing rabbit hole to go down. It sounds crazy, but I think it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's live money, and I think that you could even take it a step further to say that Bitcoin happens as a result of people expending their own energy, producing mining rigs and running nodes, and even just the decision to participate in holding Bitcoin and turning your time and energy into Bitcoin is a conversion of your energy. We're participating and interacting with this entity that is a energy network. It's yeah.
When you said entity, I'm like, Bitcoin feels like this living entity. Came straight into my mind as you said that word. It's pretty surreal. So with the DAO, like, to explain it more, like, is there like I'd like to learn more about it, Scott. Is there like the network of energy that's everywhere? Is that like a global consciousness, or is it conscious? Or is there like a God that's providing this energy onto planet Earth? Like, how's the DAO explain this connection?
Yeah, so I think of one of the aspects of Taoism that was always attractive to me is that it is sort of it's an inward personal journey that is non-prescriptive. So some Western religions, and I would choose, ones that I know, Christianity as an example, has sort of defined rules, commandments that are, don't do this, don't do that. Whereas Taoism are, the main, the sort of core text of Taoism is the Tao Te Ching, which is 81 proverbs that are really thought-provoking messages to get you just thinking about how to interact with the world, how to go out, change the way you think about things, and then change yourself on the inside, and it will change how you are on the outside. And so I think of it as an understanding that this energy exists, and it might not necessarily matter even so much whether it has a consciousness in the way we imagine a consciousness, or even just that it is, personally, I believe we are actually participating in one consciousness now. So the illusion of separation is sort of yet another example of how far away from reality we've gotten with our sort of fiat constructed world, and the notion that we own our own stuff, and we have our own houses, and those people over there, they're not like me, they don't look like me, they don't have my beliefs, we're different. That all of those things are not how it's supposed to be. These are social things, man-made things that we've created that don't reflect sort of, again, the kind of like laws of nature. And so is it a conscious? Yes, I think, but in it not in the way that we might think of a human consciousness, or even a God consciousness. It is that the universe itself has an intrinsic quality of abundance. The Tao, one thing that is true is of the Tao is that it is a giver of gifts. It is a never-ending giving machine. Like, and this is also the nature of partly what got me thinking about Taoism and Bitcoin together, because Bitcoin is also kind of like a never-ending source of giving, because the fiat system is perversely like a never-ending source of taking. All that happens in the fiat world is that your time becomes less and less valuable as your money becomes less and less valuable. These are things that are stripped away from you, and it makes you turn inward in a bad way. It makes you fend. It makes all of us fend for ourselves. It's impossible to build a cohesive sort of altruism society built on altruism when each of us is subject to this unfair systemic theft that is inescapable, because we all have to use money. Like we have no way to avoid using money. So I think that the natural order of things, if you actually step out into the wild world and just look at what is available to us, the myth of scarcity is something that has been perpetrated on us to keep us slaves, to make us feel like, because infinite money does make everything scarce, but there is plenty for everyone. We're just unable to think about things in this way because it's so difficult for people to exit the fiat way of thinking about everything. And this is kind of my idea around, what we were talking about at the outside of the conversation around what does it look like when enough people come online around this. This is like, if you start thinking about something in such a different way, at a certain point, it becomes hard to even remember how you used to think about something.
Yeah.
And then when you realize not only that, but the way that you used to think about that thing was, dumb. Like we can do this better.
It's just immature, and it's just about growing up or growing into yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sorry to cut you off, man. Bitcoin, like we can do it better, but completely agree. So you went over to China and you're teaching in China. When you went over there, was that to get closer to the DAO, to learn about the DAO, or was it just to see that's where the DAO culture originated from, and just to see how that was interacting with the human citizens over there, or what was that journey?
Yeah, I had always wanted to experience really fully being there long enough to be immersed in the culture and have a proper experience. And One of the goals was to learn the language so that I could read it in the native language it was written, and then just to you have to live it. I think you have to live it. So I spent sort of a year and change deep in the heart of China in the Sichuan province, and it was incredible. One of the best experiences of my life. I think that a lot of people. China's a hot topic because emerging status as a global influence, and different system of governance, and a lot of propaganda happens both ways. But
Yeah.
I think most people who have strong opinions about China have never been there or really spent much time there. Like, one of the things I tell a lot of people here in Canada, where I am, that people hate to hear, is that I fully believe, based on my personal experience while I was there, that the average person in China actually enjoys at least as much freedom as we do in the West. It's just different. It's just different kind of freedom. But they definitely have the ability to do things that we're totally not allowed to do here. In Canada, you have to get a permission from your local government to permit to change a toilet in your house. We do all kinds of absurd stuff in the West, and we love to. This is again part of that separation mindset. We look at them over there and say,
Interesting.
"Oh, well, they're not free, but can I please change this toilet out?" Yeah. So
yeah, that sort of makes me think. Like, it's just regulations. They have a whole lot of regulations we think are dystopian. We have a whole lot of regulations they think are dystopian. And then each side is blowing those things up and using that for the propaganda. When you're over there, was it like in one of their big major cities, or was it like in the jungle, or did you see both? Because their natural landscapes and stuff look like some of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. Did you get to see the wonders like the Great Wall of China, and like what were some of the mind-blowing things over there? Like, describe it for us. Like, what were some of the outstanding things over the time in China?
Yeah, I did. I got to do a ton of. I've seen most of. There are a few places on my list that I haven't been to personally yet. I got to go to a place called Zhoujiaigou that has since suffered a pretty serious earthquake, and I don't think it looks quite the same. But if you remember the movie Hero, it was a Jet Li movie from maybe 2000, early 2000s, and there were these incredible fighting scenes happening over these colored lakes and ponds. Zhoujiaigou was a very famous, one of the most spectacular places in the world. So I got to go there. There's a really special.
How do I spell that just quickly?
It would be Jiuzhaiguo.
Cool. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. Some other ones. There's a small rural town in south of Kunming that's called Lijiang, and Lijiang is one of the places that you see on a lot of postcards and stuff. It's one thing that's very cool about China. China's like it's an older continuous civilization than Europe. So like I was working at a school when I was there, and there had been a school on that site where I was for 4,000 years. Like a continuous running school in one.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the scale of the age of these things, like I've been to the pyramids at Giza, which allegedly are the same age, and it's totally in ruin and disrepair. And Lijiang is this city that is I don't know, thousands of years old, much older than anything you'll find in Europe, and still totally intact. Like China, they've had wars. There was, the period of time where Taoism emerged out of was a very brutal time in Chinese history, but sort of pre-gunpowder, I guess. And so a lot of these beautiful ancient cities still exist. And if you travel sort of inland in China, they're very proud. I feel like China has done an excellent job with some of their what'd you call them? Sort of natural parks and historical sites. Xi'an is another one as where the Terracotta Army is, and they built kind of an artificial thing around it to preserve them. But
Yeah.
the city of Xi'an is a has a giant like this thing has a surrounded by a giant wall that is like 40 feet tall and 40 feet wide. So, you know, the scale of these things is incomprehensible. Yeah.
With those walls, is there like a tunnel on the inside, or do you know if there is? Or
Yeah, I don't know about. I'm sure there must have been. Yeah.
That's crazy. That, say, like 4,000 years ago, they're building all these structures that were probably beautiful in their own right with the craftsmanship, you know, even if it was a bloody time and it was used to save the population. But the time and effort that went into it, and then that can last throughout multiple civilizations and still be here, like 4,000 years for a school in one place. That's yeah, really, really incredible. With Bitcoin, I think this year is going to be really interesting with the price. I think with the elections, the money printing, you're saying something backstage that could happen on the 9th, which I'd like you to go into and explain maybe from your point of view what could happen. But do you see, just like, do you focus on the price? Do you care about the price? You just think it's inevitable? Do you prefer it when it's lower? Do you prefer it when it's higher? Like, how do you see like that side of things? Because that's going to bring so many people in here. It's the first thing that people focus on is the number go up technology, which it is. And then to get like to the DAO of Bitcoin's like so far down the rabbit hole, you know, it's years down the rabbit hole. But how, maybe from like a Daoist point of view, like what's your view on the price and what that does to the Bitcoin community and social media and mainstream media and all that?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think, you know, for sure, price is the most important recruiting tool for Bitcoin, and it is important that the price goes up for sure. For me, I pay almost no attention to it at all, and I because for a couple reasons. One, I have no intention to sell, like maybe ever. I don't know. I do think that, you know, it's important to sell Bitcoin. These are bigger conversations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one, you know, the Taoist part of it would be the idea that the price of Bitcoin is going to do whatever it's going to do. And so paying attention to it or knowing constantly what it is really isn't, in my mind, all that beneficial unless you're a day trader or you're planning to sell. So I'm not planning to sell, and I personally have no influence. I have no way to make a difference on what the price is. I've done my part by buying the handful of sats I have and, you know, taking them out of circulation. So yeah. I sleep easy, not worrying about it and feeling more tied to this like underlying energetic principle. I believe that we're meant to have a better money system. And so, you know, but part B, I think that it's much more interesting. Money, all monies are a language of value. It's a system that we use to make sense of the world and to arrange, you know, the relative value and cost of things compared to how much time and energy of ours we need to convert into those things to have them or to do them in the future. And when I think about the Bitcoin price, like I think that Bitcoin is well on its way to transforming the language of value. And I would, you know, a cool exercise or place to spend your time if you're thinking about Bitcoin to me is to start thinking about other things priced in Bitcoin. So instead of saying I'll sell some Bitcoin when it's 500,000, I might instead start thinking about something like maybe I'll buy a house when it's 0.5 of a Bitcoin to buy a house. Like this is how I think about the price of Bitcoin. I think about it as the unit of account because yeah.
That's that's so interesting. So I'm like looking at a picture of an airplane. I wanted to buy an airplane like years and years ago, and I put the money into Bitcoin, and then it's just hard. They're not really that expensive. But now every time I look at an airplane, I'm like, all right, like whatever the price was going to cost, and it gets cheaper in time and then cheaper in time. But I'm still just thinking about it from that initial amount of money that I had in fiat dollars. Like now it's only going to cost, $10,000 or whatever. But I'm going to make that switch, Scott. I think that's a better way. When the airplane's, 0.001 Bitcoin or whatever, I'll buy it. Because Bitcoin's going up literally forever. And people, like, I think about Bitcoin in two ways. I've got a stack I'm never ever going to sell. Like you were saying, like it nearly feels impossible to sell that, and who knows, can't guess the future. But then just save in Bitcoin and then with Satoshis. So savings is to improve your life or purchase or whatever, and that still hasn't been touched. And I'm like, it's a pocket where I've given myself permission because it's so hard and I want to support the Bitcoin economy. And then there's like a spending, which is just Satoshis. I'll just load it up because while hoarding it's good, when you buy something in energy money, like that's freaking amazing. It's like we don't get to do it everywhere, but like, have you had those experiences where you've got like some Satoshis on Lightning and you send it to them and people are like, oh, whoa, like they just light up and you're like, you could be anywhere in the world and you could do that. So like you're saying you don't spend Bitcoin, but are you sort of spending it in those little ways or?
Yeah. I should say too, like, I'm not a monk, and I think that the point of having money is to enjoy the limited time that we have to be alive in this experience. So if you were to finish your life with more Bitcoin than everyone else and you didn't have any fun along the way, that's not the point of it either. And it's super cool. We were talking about Bitcoin events earlier and offline, and you go to events and that's the only thing people are transacting in. Like I got to go to Atlantis conference in Madeira earlier this year, and the whole thing was basically powered on Satoshis, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I think the best thing you can do is the highest compliment you can pay someone is spending Satoshis for something that they have done. So I just myself was a Canadian Bitcoin artist, Madex, and physical art only. And the Montreal conference a couple weeks ago, I bought my first piece of Madex art. The stuff is it's stuff that's designed to be worth trading money that is going to go up in price forever. So the price of that painting is going to go up forever. But it was the energy behind what he did to create it that for me made me feel, privileged to even be able to pay it. So, I think it's like entering into almost like a very thoughtful and sort of sacred exchange, which is how things should be. The reverse is totally true. When you think about people who treat money as being worthless, and we talk about money as though it's worthless, like you blow your money. I blew my money on this. And it's like, but what you're actually doing is you're blowing your energy and your time.
Yeah.
All you're doing is we're forced to use this thing that disrespects our time and energy that it took to earn it. So then what we do as a sort of side effect of that is we sort of thoughtlessly, frivolously, just burn it because it's not going to store our energy or our time anyways. So we might as well have some fun with it. And that thing itself is this, like, that is a disconnection from this universal energy. It is out of alignment with this universal law. It's dead money. We are not meant to be severed from our connection to reality because we are forced to use a language of value that has no connection to reality.
Do you think, and I want to go a little bit deep, but because we're using dead money and people are like literally just giving away their life, they're easier to control. Do you think this is like a sinister plan to keep people like on that type of system? Like, did they systematically work out the ways to, if we destroy the money, if we give it no value, then we can provide people with like bullshit food, bullshit jobs, just no self-respect for themselves, and then they can dictate what someone, because if someone's in that system, like, I just want to know how deep you think about it. They're not respecting themselves, but they're not living up to their potential. As when you flick that switch and it's a good exchange and you value the exchange, you value yourself, everything else like around you, and you really live present in the moment, and you can see like what is going on, and you can, it's like sort of when you come out, you can see the bully that is the fiat system or whatever, and then you can pull other people away, you know, or show them. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I find often there's a reluctance for people to want to admit that this whole thing might be intentional. But I do talk about in the book, like the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank, which I would say, you know, the Bank of England, these things really kicked off an era of progressive, you know, sort of neo-slavery almost. And, you know, that even those words culturally sensitive, but yeah, I mean, it was by design. They people who went through the process that, you know, it took several tries to create the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, because even people back then knew what it would mean. And when they finally were able to do it, boom, all of a sudden, for the first time, you have income tax. It's like, it's a tiny number, but that number grows. You have World War I right away. You know, these infinite money creation basically enables infinite war. And so, like, all of these, it's like a complex connection, but you know, I think it's absolutely on purpose. There's a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on the most used money in the world. Like, it's right in front of our faces, and so yeah, I think you just have to kind of recognize it. And you know, the other thing I think about a lot, honestly, is it's been going on. Once it goes on for longer than one lifetime, people are just born into it, and it becomes really difficult for anyone to imagine how things would have been before or been different. But we're talking about China and these ancient cities, and you know, Europe is the same. It would be impossible. It's not technologically impossible, but it is basically impossible in today's fiat world to build buildings that would be meant to last for 1,000 years, or for 2,000 years, or 4,000 years, because it's impossible to make money building a building. Like, to spend 30 years to build a building hoping that it will last 1,000 years, nobody could make fiat money doing that. So what we do instead is build all this disposable shit. It's fast food society, and there's no floor to how disposable everything can become. And what that does is, you know, our physical reality, the things we build, are a reflection of our imagination, and it's a reflection of, you know, so when I travel Europe, or you know, even ancient China, and you look at the beauty and the attention to detail in these buildings that they built, knowing that they would be meant for future generations to enjoy, and just marvel at how amazing they were. It's like a gift. It's really low time preference thinking about building something to last for longer than you, and doing it in a beautiful way that would inspire other people to want to do the same. And that base level is something that has been absolutely stripped out of the intrinsic culture of basically everywhere in the world. We don't have the time, we don't have the money to even think about things in that way. And the result is, we are now building a physical world that perpetuates this sort of, like, you know, bleak, dystopian, brutalist architecture, nihilistic sense of, you know, we build these houses that are like, you guys, I was just in Australia, it's the same, like various versions of cardboard houses that will be gone in 100 years. And, you know, but the price of them goes up forever. It's absurd. It's totally absurd.
It's incredibly absurd. I'm glad. The funniest story, the person that built our house won the lotto, and then blew his lotto building the house in that fiat economy. But he did a beautiful job, which was nice. So fiat did do, like, it does do wonderful things as well. But I think because it's dead money, overall creates dead things. Our house built out of wood, so it's a little bit different. But most things, like Australia's got so many houses full of asbestos, and like people are living in a toxic environment. And I think that's overall the picture of the fiat economy. And it's not all dystopian. Like we still live in the real world as well. It just, especially, I guess, it just takes away total choice and that abundance. But what do you reckon the Bitcoin world looks like? Like, just say it's the year 2030, we've switched over. By then, everyone's just using Bitcoin. How does civilization grow from there on a Bitcoin standard? Like, what do the buildings look like? What are the interactions, the conversations? What's the media and stuff like? Like, what's Bitcoin world look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, like, if you go to Sydney and you're just walking around appreciating and Sydney is a beautiful city, one of the most beautiful cities I've been fortunate enough to go to.
Yeah.
Is it the square glass towers that you really marvel at? I mean, the Opera House is amazing, but it's the buildings from 200 years ago that have that sort of like white limestone, copper dome roofs. It's that sort of like attention and care to every subtle aspect of it. And what I really hope is that we reimagine society into a place where, in the Bitcoin world, everything will have to be traded for something of value. And everything will have to be built with the understanding that it's going to need to be worth more than the Bitcoin. So it better be good. And that idea to me will permeate every aspect of how we do everything. So in my mind, nobody is going to put up for a cardboard house in a post-Bitcoin world, because why would you ever trade your Bitcoin for it? And so it will turn on its head this notion of, right now it's fast, get things done with margin, finish something so you can move on to the next product, or everything's built so that it will deteriorate so that you can make money to your customer by selling them another one when that thing breaks. And it's like, no. In the post-Bitcoin world, your refrigerator is going to be lasting for 50 years, because companies are going to have to start to reimagine how they compete, and they're going to have to compete on quality. And that will be true of everything. Like, that will be true for builders. That will be true for city planners. I believe that will be true for international governments. So when money is borderless and no longer tethered to the decisions of the state, countries are going to have to focus on delivering value for their citizens, or those citizens will leave. They take that capital to countries that value it properly. So I think that it's really a tool to completely reorganize the hierarchy. Today we have no choice, because we are all subject to the permanent and unceasing devaluation of our money. Like, we're prisoners, we're hostages to it. But if that ends, boy, look out.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. Like, I bring up the Bitcoin Way as a sponsor, but the reason I'm bringing them into the conversation now, they help people get a second passport as one of their services, as well as like securing your Bitcoin and becoming like completely a ghost online if you so desire. And when you've got that, when you've got your money, when you've got freedom of speech online, and you go to where you're valued the most, so you have the capacity to do that, you become like an unstoppable warrior, basically, like a force, ungovernable, like you're saying, unconfiscatable. When you're that person, and you're a person of value, and there's a lot of these people of value, the governments are like, that's Bitcoin game theory. They're going to want to incentivize you to stay there, because otherwise it's easy. It doesn't cost much. Everyone will just go where they want. We've seen it with El Salvador, like Bitcoin country, and people are just going there. And even if it's not going there to live, it's like every Bitcoiner wants to go there. There's this like tug in our hearts, or at least for me, just to be around Bitcoiners and see the world through a Bitcoin lens. And I'm sure it's not as good as what we see on social media and stuff, but I'm sure it's not as bad as what the masses see either on mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin is represents the dematerialization of borders, and kind of the unwinding of us being, subject. Not everybody might want to leave Australia or Canada or whatever, and that's fine. But when change, or when competition truly, when it's an open market for nations, that's also something that doesn't really exist today. So there's not a ton of pressure on countries to compete to be better at being, whatever you want to say, being somewhere for somebody to live. There are tons of Canadian Bitcoiners that have moved to Costa Rica, to the Bitcoin jungle. So that's the other thing, is like, this is already happening. So people can say, "Oh, that'll never happen," but it's already happening. It's just a small number of people.
Yeah, that's right. And with Bitcoin, it's totally possible, and it's possible right now. And you don't have to move, but to be able to have the option if you want to, and it really doesn't cost much, especially not in fiat dollars, not in those terms, to be completely free. Like that's why every time I think about Bitcoin, it's just like, it's inevitable, because it's already here for like us, for those people out there. And it's just literally just about educating people and realizing, hey, the world can be better. But, we brought it up a couple of times. They'll either, I guess it depends how quick it catches on. Like if it just catches on like rapid, which it has, like most people would say, Bitcoin's growing pretty quickly. Because of all the bureaucracy and the red tape, and it may be just too hard for them to stop. But I guess like if it's slower adoption, maybe they can fight back and it'll just take longer.
Yeah, I think, the best probably attack vector on Bitcoin is somehow maybe using the ETFs to suppress the price explosion. So if even if it turns into more of a boring creep, because they're able to naked short it, or just Coinbase goes down every time the price really starts to pump, and if that happens every single time, I'm sure these are ideas that are being kicked around behind closed doors. But I think it's like, and I talk about this in the book too, the default setting for people is optimism. We are all hardwired to want a better life, and we're all hardwired to want a better life for our kids. And people already do crazy things to ensure that their kids will have a better opportunity and a better life than they had for themselves. So this is part of like our basic genetics. So even the people who, to me, are like super anti-Bitcoin, they don't know anything about it, but they just have decided they're not interested. Those people still want a better life for their kids than they had.
Yeah.
But when they understand what this thing means, like, this is the thing, Bitcoin has no barriers for recruitment. Anyone can understand it with enough time and energy. That's the part that's unstoppable. The unstoppable part is that people do yearn for things to be better. So
yeah, it's what I think about Bitcoin is that like it just takes time. You just need to put in the time. And for some people, it's just going to take a longer time to put in that time. But once they do, you've got a background like in financial markets as well. So you're saying things like it's potential they could suppress the price. From your background, like what are some of the ways that could, the ideas that are getting kicked around backstage with the ETF? Coinbase literally has nearly gone down every single time, like in the last few months this year, every time there is like a major rally. But can you explain how those things could potentially play out? I'm not saying they're going to happen, but what type of games could they play?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an interesting, like, there's never been an asset like Bitcoin. It is the truest market for anything, for any good that has ever existed, because of the internet, because it's 24/7 and borderless. But there are access points and choke points, right? So things like making it difficult for people to turn their fiat into Bitcoin, that's a problem that's going to accelerate. So, I follow kind of like what's happening all over the world. See, major banks in Australia are getting rid of cash. It's happening up here too.
Yeah.
So capital controls is something that is not going to happen tomorrow. It's all these things are meant to be just gradual enough, right? That
They're here.
frogs in the boiling pot, right? It's like, oh no, this is good for you. Oh no, but if you want your money, you can't have it. So I think, in isolation, it's not going to be any one thing, but as they make it more difficult for individual people to maybe move their money out of the legacy system, and as the institutional buyers represent a larger portion, those institutions may be willing to even take losses in the short term on their Bitcoin positions to snuff out green candles if they're coming up. Like, this is just something I could see possible, because something like, even an asset manager like BlackRock, they're not going to want to naked short Bitcoin. A naked short on a Bitcoin at the wrong time could bankrupt even the largest asset manager in a sort of like God candle situation. But if you really zoom out and look at how much money they're managing right now, the Bitcoin position is still pretty small. So I think that it's not unreasonable to think that what they might be up to is the long game of just trying to accumulate Bitcoin without without setting the price. So like as regular people are panicking, or scalpers are trying to sell to get in at a slightly better, they're just buying on the way down and doing it in a way that's gradual enough that it's not also reversing the trend and sending the candle back up. And what I think is going to ultimately play out, and what's required, is the game theory at the macro level. So when, say, a Middle Eastern country that has real serious money, like sovereign wealth fund money, bigger than BlackRock money, starts to decouple from what everyone else is doing, and this is something that's going to really change. So I think the stage for that is already set too, with some of these things like the potential end of the petrodollar arrangement, or the BRICS countries trying to find another workable solution for how they can conduct international trade without using US dollars. If the US starts really on a large scale seizing Russian assets in foreign banks, they're creating the framework for countries to start to really think about just holding Bitcoin as an asset there, where if one major country started to decide, and El Salvador doesn't count, right? They're buying one Bitcoin a day. Like, there are people, individual people buying more than that. So I think it's going to take a big country to kick off sort of I hate to use the word arms race, but like a Bitcoin financial race, which I think would maybe overpower any sort of like Bitcoin has built within it the potential to be truly fudgeable. But that's going to take a big decision from probably a country.
Yep. In Australia yesterday, Monochrome released their spot Bitcoin ETF, which allows in-kind redemption. And it sort of made me think what you're saying with BlackRock. Maybe they're just slowly accumulating it. Maybe Bitcoin, like maybe even at that level, people are talking, hey, Bitcoin is going to be the new money. Let's get as much of this as possible. The current elite, the people that are at the top of this fiat system are in the financial market, so they're going to start to get exposure to the Bitcoin ETF, and they're going to just push this. Larry Fink already is. This is a flight to quality. He's already putting that programming out that, like, you need to have some of this, because if Bitcoin is the new thing, they are going to want to accumulate it as much as possible. And when nations start waking up to, hey, like the current elite have got a whole lot of Bitcoin or access to a whole lot of Bitcoin power, that just bang, it just starts. It's it could be peaceful as well. Like, there's you can't confiscate Bitcoin. So that may just be, I don't know, I guess money printing could lead to wouldn't be good for citizens in the short term. But the quicker they print money and the quicker they accumulate Bitcoin, then the better that country is going to be once they're on a Bitcoin standard. It's just those years.
Yeah, I think there's like that meme of like the person who's riding their bicycle and they put a stick in it and it trips them in Bitcoin, and it's like the money is going to do its thing regardless of whether Bitcoin existed or not. That's just mathematics. So all of the fiat currencies will eventually succumb to some sort of like currency event, collapse, whatever. It's happened. This happened in early China was one of the first countries that had paper money. In the 8th century, they called it flying money. And what happened? That currency hyperinflated when they printed too much of it. Like so these are also rules that are sort of timeless. And I think all that Bitcoin really has done is provided a reference point to start paying attention to it. And it's an escape hatch. And BlackRock in part too, I think, is like they're just not in the business of like losing their dominant position of wealth. So another thing I think about a lot is like, countries or even institutions like BlackRock, they are a consciousness in their own right that operates on a different time scale than a human being. So human being's life is maybe 100 years. So a long time for a person is a year or a decade. Like where our time horizons are different. Whereas a country or even BlackRock, they might be thinking about things 50 years, 100 years. Like they don't need to get all the Bitcoin tomorrow. They just need to be a part of it and sort of retain their position in the hierarchy and outlive a lot of us. And this is just like how the pyramid on the money worked. And as new people are born into it, they don't know how things could have been any different before. So I think that there's different kinds of actors participating in the Bitcoin market, and it's a mistake to think that they are going to think the way an individual person would think, because they don't have to. Canada, Australia, these countries, if they endure into the future, they're like nearly kind of almost eternal beings. So all they're trying to do is consolidate and accumulate power and influence and survive. And so they don't have the same motivations. They don't have the same immediate need that we do. We need to eat tomorrow, or else, if you go too many days without eating, you're going to die.
That's such a cool way to look at it. It's to see, because I just think about it as individuals accumulating Bitcoin, because that's what I can relate to. That's my frame of reference of reality. But you're right, these institutions are engaging with Bitcoin in such a different way, because they want to continue that power from now indefinitely. If they've got a 200, 300, 500 year plan, I'm sure with BlackRock, they don't want BlackRock just to be here for this lifetime. We want to pass it down and pass it down and pass it down. And, we've seen that throughout history. It's pretty cool. So I guess the message for everyone is to stack as much Bitcoin as possible, so BlackRock doesn't take it off you. All these entities don't take it off you. But although they'll hold that position that well through time, because Bitcoin is so decentralized and spread out through the population, and it's fair and it's uncorruptible. Like, it'll be a nuisance that, that they hold, Wall Street holds about 5% at the moment, if they hold 10% or whatever, but there's still 90% aligned with truth. So the majority will still have the power. And I think it's, even if they have a lot of Bitcoin power, the world's just going to be so much better.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, they can't do anything about when companies decide, or when customers start deciding that they want to pay for things in Bitcoin, because and when businesses don't want to accept fiat anymore, they want to be paid in Bitcoin. Like when things start to become, when the exchange of energy starts to be measured in energy money, it won't matter as much who had more at the start of it. Like at that point, it can infinitely divide and diffuse. Like this is why I use the analogy in the book, and a recurring metaphor in Taoism is the analogy of water, and the idea, water is this thing that one drop of water over millions of years will probably make its way around the whole world. Like that, this is just how things go, and Bitcoin has that kind of quality to it. It's something that is, you couldn't you couldn't control Bitcoin any more than you could really try to properly control the ocean. Like it's just not something that is possible. And all we can do is observe it. And this is another aspect of that Taoist thinking, is like, at the end of the day, you're probably just better off trying to point your boat in the right direction and be carried along with the tide.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Scott, I've linked people to your book. Like, please read the book. I'm starting to read it for the second time. It was incredible. So there's an Amazon link. I've put that Canadian Bitcoin conference video links there, as well as your X account. But like, what would be like the final thought, the final takeaway in any direction at all? Like a message for the people that are watching this video, like wherever you want to take it. And I know that, what would that be?
I think the book is meant to be a different way for people to access Bitcoin. So there are so many great Bitcoin books about the history of central banking and currency debasement and accumulating government debt, international trade. And that those books are, my book wouldn't exist without those books. I think they're not for everybody, and not everybody who is trying to understand Bitcoin needs to understand Bitcoin at that level of detail of also needing sort of a PhD in economics and finance. So the book is meant to be a different way for someone to connect to the concept of Bitcoin and perhaps start to think about it in a way that might resonate with them. So if you're a Bitcoiner and you have people in your life, and maybe I think we all do, like people who just may be Bitcoin curious, but they're just not interested in reading sort of dense academic stuff. Tao of Bitcoin's not for everybody, and I'm sure some people read it and thought it was stupid, but it's meant to be a discussion around, maybe less of how Bitcoin works and sort of a thinking about why it works, which in some ways, is just as important. I think that, not everybody needs to know or cares about why a car works, like how the car works, like all the different parts, and they just know that it works, and they're able to drive it, but they want to understand that when they get behind it, it's going to work. So that's part of the philosophy behind the book. And we were talking about this offline. Please feel free to reach out. I love engaging with people, and I'm just a person I'm just honestly a regular guy who understood Bitcoin and became inspired about a brighter tomorrow. And my favorite thing to do is to interact with other people who are on the same path. And so if you're into Bitcoin and you have some ideas you want to chat about, please feel free to hit me up.
Scott, I think that's absolutely awesome. And for the audience, like I'd urge you to reach out to Scott. And what you said there, everyone is just an ordinary person. And just sharing this message, your book, Scott, like I found was a journey deep down into consciousness and an awakening or awareness, a reminder of the truth of life, of light. That may not be for everyone. People may want to stay asleep, or they may not want to go internally within themselves. But if that is the person out there, if you are willing to be that warrior, that person that is seeking the divine truth, reading a book like The Tao of Bitcoin, and even Taoist text, Tony Robbins, you reference his book that he wrote about the Tao Te Ching. Take the time to dive into the spiritual side of life, because it is what connects you and I out there. It's what connects absolutely everything. And as we're aligning with this truth, with this energy money, with the Tao, whatever that is to you from your own beliefs. To be able to dive into the text, the wisdom that's been thought through the ages from people in different ways connecting with that Tao, the energy. I think that's important for the human spirit to be able to do. Read the religious text, but read the books. Writing that book, it's the first book my wife's been interested in Bitcoin to read. She's got a PhD. She's a doctor, and her work is absolutely intense. And when I try to give her the Bitcoin standard, she's like, too dense. That's too much for me. But the spiritual side, the Tao Bitcoin. Oh yeah. When you're finished, hand over, and I'll read it on your Kindle. So I think well done for writing that. And I think it's an important part. Most Bitcoiners will get there. It just depends whether they come in from that way or they come in from the financial side. But I'd urge everyone out there to pick up and read that book and talk to Scott, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Sean, thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. Everyone, I won't get into the comments today. I do have a dentist appointment, but if you haven't already, and we vibe, hit subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a beautiful day. Oh, and do something nice for yourself. Do something nice for somebody else. Be blessed. Peace.